We have 5 members present. 1, 2, 3, yeah, 4, 5. AJ Moyer is an auxiliary member on this committee, but he is not here today. So we're good. We've got a quorum.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Mary Beth.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll just start with the usual protocol in that pursuant to Executive Order N2920, certain provisions of the Open Meetings Act are suspended due to a state emergency in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, consistent with the Executive Order. The 2020 General Plan Update Public Services and Facilities Committee meeting will be held via Zoom format. The link for the meeting is within the posted agenda, and you may participate either by web browser or by telephone. If you are participating by telephone, to make a comment, you will use the, let's see here, I believe it's *9, but let me check. Yes, it is *9 is your command for the raise your hand function. Else, if you're participating by way of web browser, then the raise your hand function should be at the bottom of your Zoom screen. And when you click on your raise your hand button, then the clerk, Mary Beth, will recognize you and unmute you at the time when it is your turn to talk. So with that, this is the Public Services, Facility, and Finance Committee, which includes the library, and I will call this meeting to order. Let us start with standing, saluting, and the Pledge of Allegiance. I have the flag posted behind me on my wall. Here we go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Mary Beth, may we have a roll call, please?
Okay. Danny Cartwright.
Here.
Linda Kelly.
Here.
David Ring.
Here.
Lorraine Theobald. Russ Kelly.
Here.
Jesse Lunsford. Patrick Ponikvar.
Here.
And that's everyone. Okay.
Okay, I said Mary Beth, I meant Carol. Please forgive me. All right. Now we'd like to open it up for public comment for items not on the agenda. And again, if you're participating by way of telephone, it's the *9 function.
Carol, Lorraine just entered the meeting.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay, I just want to make a comment. I said this earlier, but just so it's official, I am going to have to leave the meeting a little early, and I'm glad Lorraine showed up because I think that meant I would have broke the quorum if I left. So just want to let you know if we go longer than 3:55 or so, I'm going to have to be leaving. But thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay.
No public comment for items not on the agenda.
Any members of the public wishing to comment for items not on the agenda, please raise your hand. Seeing none.
Okay, and I'm sorry, I did this backwards. I should have opened it up to the committee first for items not on the agenda. None?
I guess that would have been David saying he was leaving at 3:55.
Okay, and so, sorry about that, David, got it out of order. All right, okay, so with that, we need to adopt the agenda. May I have a motion to do so?
So move to adopt the agenda.
Thank you, and a second?
I second.
Excellent.
Do a roll call vote.
Yes.
Danny Cartwright.
Aye.
Linda Kelly.
Yes.
David Ring.
Yes.
Lorraine Theobald.
Yes.
Russ Kelly.
Yes.
And Patrick Ponifar.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay.
excellent. Mary Beth, right now at this time, did you want to move it to committee matters? For the recap?
Yeah, this time we'll go to public comment on the consent agenda. So any members of the public wishing to comment on the consent agenda, the consent agenda is one item. It's the approval of the minutes from the meeting of March 17th. Seeing none. So then we go on to the consent agenda, sir.
We need to have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
I second.
Okay, let's go with Danny Cartwright,
Aye.
Linda Kelly,
Aye.
David Ring,
Yes.
Lorraine Theobald,
Aye.
Russ Kelly,
Aye.
and Patrick Ponifar.
Aye.
And now we will go on to committee matters. So we have technical staff, Christy Consolini from Hauge Brook and Associates here to continue the discussion on public services and facilities. Welcome, Christy.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen with the agenda, hopefully.
Let me mute this.
Okay, where is everything? There we go. Okay. Can you see my screen with the agenda, the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, good. Let's take that down. Okay. So we'll start off with a recap of the March meeting and the comments that were received. Then we'll go into a discussion of the draft goals, objectives, and policies, and then talk next steps. So at the March meeting, we did an overview of what was included in the element. We touched upon finance, which is now going to be in its own element with the economic development topic. That'll be chapter 10 in volume 1. We reviewed the general plan requirements and how the element relates to other elements, such as economic development and finance. We went over the setting and the setting findings to date and the approach on the update. So comments received. There were a number of comments made during the meeting and then some written comments that were submitted. One of those was the internet service needs to be improved. And I think based on a lot of the meetings we've had where people freeze or they drop off, that's definitely a concern. And we want to make sure that we are getting the best internet service that's out there. And that there are a few options available that are actually affordable. So that was another concern that was brought up. One comment was to provide a map of where septic systems can be located. And to be specific, that septic is allowed in rural areas. I don't have a map of where septic can be placed because there's more factors than just the soil and parcel size. So we need to look at other resources that are on the site and placement. And that would come at when a person submits an application to put in a septic system, and the county environmental health goes over that and makes those determinations. So if you could look at the updated setting, there is no map for septic, but you will find some other updated maps in there. A discussion on the canals was requested, and if you look in this updated setting, you'll see that there are new text in relation to information provided by PCWA. So they were able to get back to me on my questions. And so there's updated text on water delivery service, the canal system, and then also there's a map showing their hydrant locations, their water main locations, and basic information that you might find helpful. On figure 5-1, which shows basic services in the town, there was a request to show services just outside of town. So if you look at that map, you will see that there are a few areas where we have, say, schools or fire protection or things like that shown out just outside of town. So you kind of get a sense of what's going on around Loomis, not just within the town boundary. There was a request to include a reference that transit facilities are covered under the circulation element. So if you look in the element, the public services and facilities element, you'll see that there are references in the initial introduction paragraph talking about where we can find related topics and where those elements are covering them. So for example, things like transit would be in the circulation element, parks will be in the parks and recreation element. There was a question on how does the school district prioritize local students versus transfers? And the short answer to that is that they want as many students as possible. That's how schools get their funding from the state. So they're not going to turn away people. Transfers, they will give them priority if they are there for multiple years. So say a child enters as a third grader, they're not going to shut them out as a fourth grader and tell them to find another school. The school will simply add more space if that's needed. And that can be done through temporary portable structures and things like that. And then there were various types of corrections to the setting text. Thank you for sending those in. I appreciate it. My eyes don't always catch typos and things of that nature. So if you look through the setting, you'll see that there have been changes. The new ones are underlined. Anything old has been accepted and is in the document, not shown as an underline anymore. So let's go into a discussion of the draft goals, objectives, and policies. Some of you may have seen this slide before. So this just gives an overview of what goals, objectives, policies, and implementation measures are. You can find a little more information about this on the website for the general plan update, and here's the link for that. Basically, goals are kind of that broad perspective, direction setting, non-quantifiable aim that we all have for these different topics. Objectives are the link between the goal and the policy, in that it's an intermediate step. It usually has some type of condition or a state of being affected with that. Policies indicate commitments to a course of action or decision making, and the implementation measures are those actions. And they're typically quantified and time dependent. So there might be things that are ongoing. You'll see that in a few minutes when I go through the element changes. And some of them, though, might be short-term measures or things that you want to accomplish maybe on a 10-year scale, or things that are more long-term. So existing goals and policies, the public services and facilities element has two existing goals. And the first is to achieve and maintain high levels of public services and facilities for Loomis residents when appropriate through coordination with outside service agencies. And the second is to assist local school districts as feasible in providing adequate educational facilities for Loomis students and cooperate in developing joint community and recreational uses. Then there are a number of policies that go along with those goals. And you'll see on this screen, there's little notes over here, and these are my suggestions based on comments I've received or things that my suggestions. So we will go into each of and these updates in a minute. I will take you to the actual element with changes shown in strikeout and underline mode. But basically, I'll go through with the existing right now. So the first is that Loomis will work toward achieving and maintaining acceptable levels of municipal services, including public safety, roadway maintenance, and administrative services. Loomis will cooperate with regional public service agencies to attain adequate service levels for water distribution, sewage services, flood management, and solid waste collection. There's a lot going on in that policy, so I would recommend breaking that up just a bit so that we can have some implementation measures that are a little more focused. The second is non-residential and higher density residential development shall not be expanded into areas lacking public services infrastructure until existing vacant land with these services within the town limits is utilized, or proposed development ensures the extension of necessary infrastructure through actual construction or payment of fees. I think that is well said, and I recommend keeping that. The third is Loomis shall work with school districts in reviewing district land use decisions involving the provision of adequate educational facilities for Loomis students. I think that is fair. We might want to add safe routes to that to expand that just a bit. The fourth policy relates to water supply and sewage disposal systems. So it's talking about where you can have a water supply connection or a sewage connection, and who needs to be connected to that, and then what are the parameters for not connecting to that. So if you have an acre of or 2.2 acre parcel and you're too far away to connect to the sewer system, then that's a case where you would have septic systems possibly allowable depending on the site constraints. I think these are really good to keep. We might want to consider adding water well quality and septic siting to that, just a little more detail. The fifth policy is that Loomis shall continue to work with the town solid waste collector in improving the recycling program within the town. I think we can keep that. We need to update that though to reflect Recology instead of Auburn Placer disposal. The sixth is the town should support source reduction and recycling efforts through the use of recycling products in all town departments whenever feasible. And in the future, the seventh is in the future, adequate landfill space. If it can't be found to meet the needs, no new development should be approved until there is space identified. And I think both of those are good to keep. The eighth policy is new construction and reconstruction restoration shall consider energy conservation in the selection of building materials, building orientation, and landscaping. I think that's good. I think we can combine that though. I'll look for your direction on this, but I think we can combine it with 10 and 11, which I'll skip around here just a bit. 10 states the town shall actively participate in the energy conservation programs of the local, state, and federal agencies. And 11, the town shall consider the use of alternative energy sources for public facilities. And then on policy 9, the town shall identify the potential for energy conservation measures for the use of renewable energy sources and alternatives to fossil fuels. This is very highly related to energy in the sense of conservation of resources. And I think maybe that's a policy that should be more appropriately relocated to that discussion. There are no existing implementation measures in the current element. And then, as I mentioned previously, the finance goals, policies, and implementation measures will be relocated to that economic development and finance element. So some questions to consider when you're reviewing the policies. Has the policy or program been effective? Does it address the corresponding goal? Is the text appropriate still? Has it been completed? Is it no longer relevant to include this? Does it belong in another element, such as the one I just mentioned, policy 9? How can existing policies be strengthened? Are there issues not addressed by the element that should be? And for example, there were no policies related to the library. I don't know if anyone caught that, but there was nothing in there, and I think we should add something. Which goals, policies, and implementation measures correspond with one another? So for the proposed goals, objectives, and policies, and we'll go line by line in just a minute, so you can see everything. For the goals, I'm suggesting we keep them with some minor adjustments. Objectives, we need to add. There are no objectives currently. We should add some policies regarding utility extension and undergrounding. I think there should be some distinct policies for fire protection, law enforcement, storm drainage, and the library instead of having things just lumped together. I think there's an opportunity for a policy on water conservation in relation to water service. And I think we can make some small adjustments to the policies regarding solid waste and schools. So I've drafted a few implementation measures that would go along with some of these, and you can look at those and review and comment on them as well. And any edits to the draft goals, objectives, policies, and implementation measures will be based on your input. So I'm looking for you to tell me what you want to keep, what you want to change, and what you like as is. So our next steps. Review the draft public services and facilities setting and element. So there's been an update to the setting, and there is a element that's available on the website. Provide comments, and also participate in the Loomis Social Pinpoint General Plan Update Survey. So there is a specific page for public services and facilities. I noticed there's a few comments on there. They're both related to parks, which belong in the Parks and Recreation element, and we will share that with them. But if you have any other comments on, say, storm drainage or other topics related to public facilities and services, we can take a look at those, but you need to put them in on the map so we can see them. Our next meeting will be June 16th at 3 o'clock. And here are the available documents, just some links where you can find them. So I am going to briefly stop sharing this page, and I will share another.
While you're making the change there, want to let everybody know that as the comments come in, we're actually posting them up to the town website. They're available at a link on the town website based on some requests. The next time we post them on Monday, there'll actually be an Excel file that you can sort yourself, and there'll also be the comments as a PDF. Some people were having problems with the Excel file. So I think as of today, we have about 850 comments. So those will be posted on Monday. We're downloading the comments from Social Pinpoint, putting that into this file. So you can see every comment made since this process began on that file.
So can everyone see the public services and facilities element?
Yes.
Okay. So I won't go line by line through the introduction, but if you have comments on them, please submit, and I will take care of that. So let's just.
Christy, could you turn off the share paragraph thing? That little paragraph, it just adds more stuff to look at.
The share paragraph?
Yeah, where you see it shows the formatting, all those symbols for the formatting.
Oh, yeah, hold on.
Thank you.
How do I do that?
Is this a Word document that you're sharing?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Christy,
I think that's under the home site. Go to home. No, not there. Down one row. There. That's it. And then to the right-hand side, you'll see the highlighted P. Under Tell Me. There you. Oop.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you see the highlighted?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you want those off? Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, there's just too much stuff.
Got it. Okay. I thought you wanted to get rid of this.
No.
Okay. So let's jump in. I am keeping pretty much, you can see the goals here, right here, as they are. I did not propose a change on there, except for adding an utility. If you, I'll go and read through them, each one. So the first, and you'll see that everyone will have a little bit of a different numbering system, and that way we can keep this in line, and you can, at the end, you'll be able to then connect, say, an implementation measure to an objective, and it has a little bit better connectivity. Okay, so the first goal, to achieve and maintain high levels of public and utility services and facilities for Loomis residents when appropriate through coordination with outside service agencies. What I would like to do is, when I go through these, if you have comments, please interject.
And committee members, that just means unmute yourself and speak. You don't have to go through the whole raise hand thing.
Yeah, the other is if you're in concurrence with it, let us know, and then we don't change it, then we'll take that forward. So it's good to know if you agree with the goal, policy, objective, or if you want changes to it. So as we go through it, hopefully we go through it once, and then you'll get to review this in its revised form.
We have an attendee, a public comment. If you would like do you want those interactive at this point, or keep them at bay?
Let's do that because we're going goal by goal, yes.
Okay. Jean, go ahead.
This goal mainly or exclusively mentions utilities, and I'm wondering, you brought up that we haven't mentioned anything about the library. I'm not really sure where library is in this goal, and somebody said that at a different meeting that part of that was also going in Parks and Recreation. So the second one, I'm trying to read it, if it has to do with schools, where does library fit here in this element and in these goals?
And perhaps that is maybe phrasing on the first one. So my intent was to put it in the first goal, but maybe it needs to say public services and utility services, with library being a public service.
Okay.
That's a good recommendation.
Okay.
I have a question about that. And that is to achieve and maintain. And we don't maintain services for other utilities, water, fire department. We don't do the maintenance on those things. We don't do the maintenance on the sewer system. So it just, to achieve and maintain, I think is.
By maintain, it's not physically maintain, but maintain a level of service.
Well, the utility companies, they need to coordinate for a level of service, not, I don't know that we would maintain that. The water agency has their policies that they go through. And so we comply with those policies and suggest new policies if there's a conflict.
Right. I think this is more stating just to achieve and keep a high level of service.
Well, as a goal, this is the goal of the town, is to have the high levels of services. So the discussion on who maintains it, et cetera, is actually either a policy or is going to be an implementation measure. So at this point in time, a goal is something you may not be able to achieve that you aspire to achieve. And what you're aspiring to achieve is that the town of Loomis has a high level of public services and utilities. That's what you're trying to achieve here.
I think it also says when appropriate through coordination with outside service agencies. It kind of explains we're using outside agencies, but we want to make sure our residents have access to high levels of these services. So
Correct.
that's the way I read it. I didn't, I understand Russ's concern about saying we're going to maintain, but if you completely read the whole thing, I think it explains it really well.
Maybe you can use continue and improve as opposed to maintain, which sounds like you are responsible.
Maybe and continue. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I read it the way you meant it, but when Russ pointed out maintain, I think that could be legally read as that we are responsible for the maintenance, and I would not want that to be something we're trying to imply with this statement.
Okay, so we want to say to achieve and continue.
I think I would agree with that. Yeah.
Again, this is a goal, so this is things we aspire to. This isn't something that imposes legal obligations on us.
It could be coordinate.
Well, we have that at the end of the sentence.
Right. Okay.
So does that look good to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay.
My only comment is public services, comma, utility services, comma, and facilities.
Oh, Mary Beth.
No, that's good. I mean, I want to get this all out so we are all on the same page. Okay, so does that look appropriate to everybody?
And you said the library is, I can see library being in public services and
Yes.
facilities, both. So
Right.
Correct. That is
I think
correct.
that's fine.
Yeah. It's the goal is meant to be pretty broad and generic.
Yep.
Okay, so the second goal, which is the existing goal in the element right now, and that is to assist local school districts as feasible in providing adequate educational facilities for Loomis students and cooperate in developing joint community and recreational uses.
And is this where you put the safe route to schools?
No, that's
Comment?
going to
Okay.
come later.
All right.
Yeah, these are again just those
The goals, yeah.
broad brushstrokes. So any comment?
Well, I noticed that you said adequate educational facilities for Loomis students. So it didn't say Loomis resident students. It just says Loomis students. Because we really do have a lot of transfer students.
Right.
And I really feel the Loomis residents should have priority over those students. And if it means we have to continue to put facilities on these to keep all these transfers, that's a lot of money. And, you know, it's kind of what I feel. I don't know if we can specify, or it's general enough the way it is, you know.
I think since you say Loomis students in there, it's broad enough to capture that. So I think the thing to think about then is looking at policies later on where we may want to say that our focus is on providing for Loomis students.
And I just, does that, to me, it also includes students of all ages. So if we have, you know, residents who want to take, you know, as you know, adults in, you know, any adult learning programs, I think we should be also providing as adequate educational facilities for them as well. And so
Okay.
to me, I read that as applying to all students and not just students, like children that are in our schools.
You may want to put in Loomis students of all ages and then the comma. That would clarify that, David.
Okay.
Jean, did you have a comment?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Am I on? Okay. Well, we're just assisting in providing. I guess the town doesn't actually provide anything, nor does I don't know that the school districts, well, I guess they do have some education, adult education, so that should be okay. But the town is not actually providing any, but I guess since we're assisting them, that would be things that we can do. So that's okay.
No, Gene, I thought the town provided some funding for recreation.
Yes, out of our park funds.
Right. Okay.
And I would actually, we rarely do this, but I'm going to disagree with Jean on this. And that I think that the library does provide, there's a couple of programs that the library provides that are educational for everybody. I mean, might not be a class that you pay for, but it's definitely something that's providing an educational opportunity.
I agree
Sorry.
very, very much. Yes.
So it'd be local schools and libraries?
Correct.
And the library.
Yeah. Is that the
Good
correct
catch,
name?
David.
Okay, there you go. Thank you, Christy. You got the correct name.
Okay. So we're good there? Okay.
Everybody's.
I can only see a few of you at a time, so I can't see everyone. So moving on, here you're going to see a lot of changes, and anything that's existing that maybe needs to be changed, or maybe the flow of the sentence doesn't work quite right anymore. It's shown, the text is shown crossed out. Anything that's brand new is shown in underline. So all the objectives you see are going to be underlined because there are not any at this time. So the first objective is the logical extension of utilities to provide a safe and reliable level of utility service. Oh, and before I go too much farther in this, I'm just going to interject here. You'll see that we'll get deeper into each of these topics. So this first objective is sort of a broader stroke for utilities. And then as we go along, you'll see the objectives will change to be a little bit more detailed instead of a general utility. So for example, we get into fire here, and then law enforcement, water and sewer service, drainage, storm drainage, and the library, and solid waste, and schools at the very end. So just keep that in mind. If you don't see it right off the top, it doesn't mean it's not there. It just means we haven't gotten to it yet. Okay, so going back, the logical extension of utilities to provide a safe and reliable level of utility service is the objective. Any comment?
Why don't you move into the policies and then we
Okay, and
can
then
make sure that the objectives
go
and the
back to that.
policies match up.
Okay.
Do we know what percentage of Loomis is on septic versus regular sewage? In terms of what is logical and what is unrealistic?
This isn't just septic, so this is a general statement on
I realize, but that's
all
a
utility.
very expensive proposition, and also gray water, which I'm not sure in terms of drainage systems. So
I don't have that percentage off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So the first policy is non-residential and higher density residential development shall not be expanded into areas lacking public services infrastructure until existing vacant land with these services within the town limits is utilized, or proposed development ensures the extension of necessary infrastructure through actual construction or payment of fees. You might remember me saying this just a few minutes ago. This is the existing policy. I've added a policy stating new development shall be served by electric power, natural gas, or propane, telephone and high-speed communications, and development projects shall provide for said services and their associated infrastructure prior to occupancy. The next policy is the town shall coordinate with public and private utility providers to ensure infrastructure and services meet the needs of the town and encourage expansion and improvement of wireless communication systems and facilities.
Are we interjecting whenever we?
Let me read them and then,
okay.
And then we'll go back.
Got it.
And then a fourth is utilities in new neighborhoods shall be located underground where operationally feasible, preferably with communications and other dry utilities located within joint trenches. Above ground utilities in existing neighborhoods shall be relocated underground where feasible. And a fifth policy is new construction and reconstruction restoration shall consider energy conservation and selection of building materials, building orientation and landscaping, and shall encourage the use of solar infrastructure on new and existing structures, including public facilities, to actively participate in local, state, and federal energy conservation programs and strategies. So going back to the objective and the policies, are there any comments?
In terms of the policy, I question the use of propane and gas as something we want going forward.
That's actually something we're talking about in the natural resources. Yep. And that's actually, I just read that the state of California is really looking at developing a policy of its own that says that they're going to limit the amount of natural gas and propane going forward. So
Also,
yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that I think it's the Engineers Council have recently said that no new exploration should be going on in terms of oil and gas drilling, and that the use of these in future construction should be ended immediately in order to improve air pollution, health and safety of communities. So I would not put that in the policy, or I would object to that being in the policy, that we think the propane and natural gas to new construction is appropriate. I think they need electrification in order to build.
That is my preference as well, but that's only two of us, so.
One of the things I might say about that one is as new resources evolve, we should definitely investigate those. And right here in the policy 2, it doesn't relate to solar power. And it's just solar power is one of the things that we strive to get, and it's just not included here.
Okay.
And natural gas or propane, I think we have existing facilities that need to be reused. We need to be careful about that, because the water lines and the gas lines and all the utilities are being put in to serve new needs. Example, Barton Road has a gas line that goes about 1,000 feet. You don't want to just cut off that for some sort of new development. You may not want to rely on that 100%, and there may be state options and federal options that we may want to look at, but there's infrastructure in place that costs people a lot of money, and we need to take advantage of that as necessary or as practical.
I don't think, though, that new construction reliant exclusively on natural gas or propane should continue. People would need, that would just.
Yeah, because this requires it to be used. And if we want to use it, even if we say as necessary, that's fine. But this right here, this policy says it has to be.
Jean, go ahead.
Well, if this would apply to anybody that comes in for a building permit right now, I understand phasing it out. I really do. But I think that's a big change to make if this goes into effect, that, you know, right now, as soon as this is adopted, would they not be able to use their propane anymore, and everybody has to switch to hopefully solar and get their costs down. I don't know about excluding it at this point. Maybe we need a policy to phase it out.
If you remove natural, if you remove the term natural gas or propane, it doesn't prohibit you from putting that in for a house or a subdivision. It just doesn't mandate that it goes in there. So that would be the difference by removing that language.
And it's the California
Okay.
Building Code that regulates like solar and, those kinds of things. So it's kind of covered with permitting from the building permit side.
And it's also not requiring people who currently have gas to shut it off.
Correct.
It's just saying any new houses that get built will not be required to have a gas line coming in.
That's correct.
One
So
additional
violent-
point of clarification, because we use the term new development, we may want to be a little bit more clear on what a remodel would do, whether a remodel would be or would not fall under this goal.
And again, I'm actually fine. It doesn't. I think a remodel is fine. We're not saying you have to get rid of it. This just says that it has to have electric and telephone and high speed. It doesn't have to have. It just, if it has natural gas, fine. If it doesn't, fine. But it has to have, in my opinion, it has to have electric, telephone, and high speed.
I think
That's my
if you're gonna
opinion as
take
well. You
propane
can't
out there, you
development
need to take
exclusively.
telephone out also, because we don't know what a telephone is anymore. It's not communication lines in the ground. And I don't have a telephone line to my house. I mean, there's one out in the street, but I don't use it because it's inefficient and it doesn't provide the high-speed communications that I need.
So maybe it's redundant to say telephone and high speed.
It is.
And I would then say that we need to have, when it says high speed communications, it needs to say wired high speed communications.
True.
Mm-hmm.
That's expensive and you're not going to be able to afford that.
A telephone line is currently active as a wired high speed communication line.
Correct.
So it still applies. So even if you're going to put in a phone line, just a regular phone line, then that's still a high speed communication line.
But that shouldn't be.
And you're saying that that shouldn't be required as a wired line to the house.
That's right. You can't require wired lines because there's other options for that.
And I would.
I
agree that there are other options. I would disagree that I would like to see a wired line to my house, because I would be very sad if I went to buy a house and my only option was wireless internet or satellite internet, because that's super expensive. Both of those are.
So is a developer trying to put in wired communications. If they have to put it in themselves,
they go ahead.
It could be very expensive and make it so that it's not affordable. When in fact you can have a regular telephone line and you can have high-speed communications over. I mean, we're talking about a wireless unit, and you can put that on your house and you can have the service, and it would be far cheaper. Matter of fact, we had to do that with the library. We had to take the library off someplace to have the high-speed communications because they couldn't get it over the lines. They couldn't get it over the lines that are in the ground for the high-speed stuff. So it's just wired is not, I don't think, a good deal. If you're talking, I mean, you're either talking fiber or you're talking wired, and they both have the potential of being in the ground, which is very expensive and sometimes almost impossible. Although the fact of the matter is, it across the top of Sierra College Boulevard is all lava rock, and Roseville Telephone Company had to put a vault up the top of that hill, and we went through massive amounts of equipment because it was required, and it eventually was done, but the cost was extreme. And anyway, and it's in-ground service.
Well, here's something to ponder. I've actually been looking at the Starlink system for my home and reading about it. And they talk about that one of the reasons you want a wired system is because of the latency in the signal, the dependency of the signal. And it's recommended that you have a wired system versus, say, the satellite system for a better service. What we could do, I mean, a couple of things here. One is just say a wired communications instead of high speed. And the other is on new development. Are we talking just a building permit or remodeling, or are we talking about subdivided property where you're, actually putting in new lots and infrastructure with those lots? And that's pretty typical when you're building a new subdivision. You put in the roads, you put in the utilities all at one time. And I think that's probably where this policy should focus on, is that versus a building permit.
I agree with that. Can I ask one question? If anybody knows, does the state require, or the federal government even require? They probably do a telephone line.
No,
Any new?
No.
Yes or no?
they don't
No.
require. Matter of fact,
Really?
I would tell you that when I built my house here in 1968, I came out and there was a telephone guy in my house. I said, "What are you doing here?" He said, "Well, I'm here to wire your house." I said, "Okay." And the fact of the matter is, the reason I let him wire it was because normally they charge you for that. And the fact of the matter is, he did it without permission. And therefore, when they came out with a rule where they own the cable in your house, I didn't allow him to do that. I said, the cable belongs to me because you didn't put it in there per my permission. You came on my property and you did something that benefited me, but you also benefited yourself. And I have had trouble with communications here. I worked for the telephone company for 27 years, and I put in all kinds of fiber optic lines, controlled environmental vaults, and I put in every form of communications from you can imagine, and it's still in service. And in the rural area out here, it is not good. Even wave broadband is not good. I lose communications here 5 to 10 times a day. And my phone system wasn't much better because I tried the satellite and that's not much better. So the service it's not capable at this point of meeting all the things that we'd like it to meet.
I would like to add, though, in terms of conservation of natural resources, wireless uses up to 5 to 6 times more energy currently than wired. So it is an enormous consumer of energy and growing all the time compared to wired. So I think we probably need to get some consultation on this if we're going to put it in.
You're saying we need consultation on the use of the term wired?
Wired, yeah. I'm maybe fiber optic or something, those considerations, but I would encourage us to use things that use less energy. If we're talking conservation of natural resources, since all use of energy affects all use of traditional energy currently affecting human health and air pollution, particularly in our community.
So this is a public services and facilities. So, probably we need to take a look and maybe make a note, Christy, to have in the natural or the conservation element, the discussion of facilities that save energy. But I thought, Lorraine, you just said that the wired use far less energy than the wireless.
Wireless uses the most energy.
Right.
5 to 6 times at this point, and increasingly using more.
Right.
Yeah.
So by putting wired communication systems into a new subdivision, that would be conserving energy.
That's right.
Okay.
Actually, I'm not sure how that information comes about, but I would tell you that one of my facilities had a 2000 kW diesel generator to provide backup services for that. And a telephone office is extremely using an extreme amount of power. I'm not sure what the power is in the one in Loomis, but I manage 400,000 square feet of facilities, and I could tell you my power bill way back when was around $30,000 a month.
I just, just a real quick thing based with the energy, it's definitely like with current technology, because just physically what's happening is you have to use the same amount of energy in every direction. Whereas with wired, you're sending it in one specific direction. It's very focused. And so you can definitely, it's definitely for similar systems going to be more wire or more energy efficient going wired than wireless.
So I'm thinking, go ahead.
I actually have to get going, and I'm really, really sad that I'm missing all of this. But I wanted to, if I can throw in my comments for the rest of what's going on. I do like safe routes to schools. I do think that you should add a policy for the library, police, and fire. You were talking about doing that. Policy 9 seemed different, slightly different than 10 and 11, but I think 10 and 11, putting them together, I think would be okay. And then my one last comment is the number of maps that we're putting into the general plan. I love that, but putting in like where are all the gas lines and where are all the water lines and where are all the electric lines, to me, putting that in a public document that is out on the internet, unless that's common practice, is just asking for someone to look that information up and say, I can just park a diesel truck here and light it on fire at this intersection, and it will wipe out the entire, the whole region.
It's just the water. Only the water is shown. I thought
the propane. I thought the gas one was also shown, but
no.
That's fine.
No.
Okay, as long as we're taking that into consideration. And one last thing is cybersecurity. Like if we're trying to implement something for the town, that's a public service. Is that something that should be going into here as well?
That's something.
So just something to think about.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Please, if you have any other comments, just please send them my way, and I will.
Yep, I will do that, and I will look through everything. This is all going to be up online. All these changes will be online real soon, right? Good.
Yes.
All
So
right. I apologize. I really am sorry that I'm leaving. This is all great conversation, and I'm sad I'm missing it. But thank you again, everybody.
Thanks for your input.
Thank you, David.
Okay, so going back, any more comments on this particular policy?
I just have one comment. That's me, auxiliary, Duncan. I just, I know a lot of people don't have a landline anymore. Everyone relies on their cell phone and, satellite. But what I hear in our area all the time is the failure of, keeping the connection and everything. From a safety standpoint, I don't know if people will even, keep a landline or want some type of wired communication. But I think we should look at that issue from that standpoint as well. It's not just about what's the cheapest or, I would like to say, yes, I want satellite for the efficiency if it was always there for connection, but we've seen like with some of the fires in the past, cell communication shut down and no one could communicate. So I'm not saying that you can't take your phone landline with you as you're evacuating, but it is a way in the past that people have been notified, when cellular is broken down. So I'm just concerned about striking something out that may have a safety
context.
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. Thanks.
I still have a landline because my cell does not work well in my house. So I know, here it is. And it works great. We never have any problems with it. So I don't know what I would do without it, because I cannot communicate consistently with this. There's just a dead zone where I live. So it's frustrating.
So kind of summarizing, this policy says if there's a new subdivision in Loomis, it's going to provide electric power and wired communications. That's what it says. So is that what you want it to say?
I still think that the wired communication still bothers me. The reason that I would tell you all this is that the cell towers are connected to each other through landlines. The telephone system is connected to, when you connect your phone to a tower in Loomis, you go through the central office to get the trunk groups that take you elsewhere, okay? So all of that stuff goes through a wired system, whether you like it or not, because the cell system can't handle all that. It goes through, for example, in Roseville, the Roseville telephone office there, all the fiber comes into the office, and anything off of that towers from those offices all goes down into a wired system, and it gets transmitted on different connections to somewhere else. Okay. So it is ultimately wired service, but new service, it's not going to make any difference. The reason those places fail with when they have fires is because the cell systems go down, and or they can't make communications to the central office where everything is connected out of.
Jean, go ahead.
I think we should leave it the way it is. A subdivision is already going to have trenches in for water and electricity and who knows what else by then. And I think we should leave that option. We have a landline still, as well as cell phones. And, you know, some people, not the majority anymore, still do. But I think it's better to leave that in there than to take it away, and then people don't have any option later. Nobody's going to tear it up and find a trench if there's some reason that in the future we need to leave that in there. So that's my opinion. Leave it there.
Okay, so I think I'm hearing what you see on the screen with those changes. So new subdivisions shall be served by electric power and wired communications, and development projects shall provide for said services and their associated infrastructure prior to occupancy. Are we in agreement on that?
I have one question. The natural gas or propane, is that law right now that they're not going to allow it? Because we can't just assume that's going to happen. I just still feel like that needs to be in there, because people need to have options. And if that's the option, if they want a gas stove to cook on, they should be able to get a gas stove in their house and be able to cook on it. So, you know, but if it's not a law that they can't do that right now, we need to include it in here. So I don't know when it's going to go into law. So I don't know. I just feel like we need to leave that in there. That's just my opinion. Sorry.
I agree with Linda.
I thought we covered that, in that it doesn't demand that they not have it. It only says that they must have electricity and wired communication. And I was hoping to put in there undergrounded wired communication. Nobody's stopping you from having a propane tank, unless there's some other law in the state that prevents having a propane tank. But to have a construction with exclusively a propane tank, which this would allow, is unsafe.
So Linda, this does not prohibit somebody from putting a natural gas line in. It just doesn't require it. This policy, if you leave that in there, says you shall put that in there.
Okay, I feel better about it then. Thanks for that.
I know. You can see now when we review subdivision projects and other things, the kind of debates we go with ourselves. These words mean a whole lot.
Yes.
They do.
Okay, so any other comments on this suite of objectives and policy?
The only other question I have is, can we underground these?
Yeah, that's number 4, policy 4.
Great.
Utility shall be located underground where operationally feasible.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. And there are implementation measures, but since it's we've already been here an hour. I'm going to skip those for this meeting. We can come back to them. But I want to try to get through each of the objectives and policies during this meeting.
Stop you there on one of those.
I have a question about, though, before we go, can you move it back?
Yes. Yes.
On the one where PSF 1.1.4, it says utilities in new neighborhoods shall be located underground where operationally feasible, preferably with communications and other dry utilities located within joint trenches. Above ground utilities in existing neighborhoods shall be relocated underground where feasible. Where's the money coming for to do that? And who decides what little street gets underground versus, they're all going to come in and go, wow, this street would look much better with underground. Let's put it in. Who pays for that? Where does that money come from?
That's where the where feasible comes in.
Where feasible. Who decides where it's feasible? Who decides that?
So this would come out of, say, the town wants to make a visual improvement to a certain area. Oftentimes that's done with undergrounding a utility. That means that there would have to be funding available, and it's very expensive to put the facilities underground.
And the utility companies actually have programs for undergrounding, and you have to apply for that money, but usually it's where there's a fire problem or something else. But there is money available from the utility companies to underground their lines, but there's not that much, and it takes a while to finally get those implemented.
So that's just basically in there to give us hope that someday it might be there in 100 years from now.
It's to give us hope, and it's also if a new subdivision coming in and dragging new lines in, then they are required to underground.
Well, yeah, I agree. Anything new should be underground, but I'm just wondering, how do we get on that list so my street gets underground? Because I really like that.
Actually, I think based on the thing that Andrew's talking about is PG&E has a funding mechanism, and one of their things that we would like to do is remove the high power lines that are going right through the middle of town. Okay, they affect some of our buildings there that are metal roof buildings, and we're talking a 60 kVA power system. It's putting it underground is a major deal. And so they're putting funding away to do that. We haven't got near close to the amount of money it's going to take to do that yet.
And part of my reasoning for including that was, we have these power shutoffs that occur when the wind gets windy out. So the more that we have underground, if, when those funds are available, the more reliable, it won't happen until the whole system is placed underground, but the more we can do, the more reliability essentially we can have. So that's, it's out there. It's not something that there's a lot of funding for, but I think it's a good thing to push for when we can. Okay, so moving on to the next objective. The maintenance of a good working relationship with the South Placer Fire District and Penryn Fire District in the interest of public safety and the provision of adequate fire protection services. I'm going to go over the policies too. So the first one is new development projects shall comply with the current fire code and local fire safety ordinances, pay their fair share to mitigate the increased demands on fire service, and shall coordinate with the appropriate fire district to ensure adequate fire access and design safety, to ensure that adequate fire access and design safety is provided. And then a second policy is that the town shall cooperate with the South Placer Fire District, Penryn Fire District, and American Medical Response Ambulance Service in the provision of prompt and adequate emergency medical service.
I don't know that you need to say the fire districts, because there's South Placer has two districts, District 1 and District 2. Penryn has their district, but just coordination. The town actually approves the increases that the fire department has. So if the fire department's going to raise the fees for permits and that sort of thing, the town actually has to get the council to approve it before they actually implement it. So it's,
Except in the case, I worked on the Costco project, and in that case, Costco cut a deal directly with South Placer Fire for additional annual funding that was not a tax rate. It was actually a special district. And Rayleigh's also has an agreement with South Placer in the same way. So it's important as projects come in, if special funding has to be required, then that can be negotiated by the development directly with South Placer Fire.
right, but those were not, I mean, the fire marshal decides all that.
Correct.
The town don't decide any of that. The fire marshal decides that. And it goes through their board.
Yes, but the town did cooperate with South Placer in making that happen. So there is some, but the coordination cooperation is required.
Any changes? Okay, I'm hearing silence. So let's move on to, and there's an implementation measure here I have highlighted. So hopefully we have time to get back to that, because I do want your input. So objective 3, the adequate provision by new development projects to address incremental impacts upon law enforcement services and facilities. There's 2 policies. The first is, within the town's budgetary constraints, the town shall fund officer staff levels to maintain the county sheriff's department staffing ratio of 1 officer per 1,000 residents. If it is determined that lack of revenues could jeopardize service, a plan and/or policies should be put in effect to generate needed revenues. The second policy is, the town shall consider public safety issues related to commercial and residential design to ensure new projects do not strain law enforcement service levels.
Is the 1 to 1,000 an old contract with,
No, that is their staffing ratio.
that's,
The county sheriff.
the county sheriff sets up that ratio, or?
Correct.
And it's been in effect for how long?
At least 5 years.
Okay.
But probably much longer than that. That's a standard ratio that I've seen over quite a few decades.
So if we add 300 new housing units and there's 1,000 new people, then that would have to allocate more money for sheriff's department. Is that how it works?
Right. So suddenly your population increases by 1,000 people, then you're going to have to add another officer or pay for that.
Yeah.
But that comes out of our property taxes, right? So there's no new funding. It's just the new property tax.
Right. You have funding from your developer and the property tax that goes on.
It seems like what we should do is look at new development and say, if in fact this needs to provide, same as the fire department, new equipment or new things that we don't currently have, we should do the same thing that the fire department does, and it's part of the review of the sheriff's department. So if you had to have a new officer, you got to have a new vehicle, or you make some changes. So it seems like we should look to see if there's some kind of something we can do to support that, just besides the new taxes.
You know, generally, Russ, that occurs when you're doing the environmental document, that you may ask for new equipment, but I know the sheriff looks at a package. If you need 1 more officer, there's actually more than 1 officer that is involved because of the shifts, plus you have the equipment, the cameras, the cars, whatever. So the sheriff does come up with that rate. This policy does talk about if you don't have enough funding to look for other funding, but it doesn't say what that funding will be.
Nope.
This one here,
Anybody?
that 1.2.2. I think let's see, with the fire district. So the first responders for ambulances is South Placer, and then American Medical is secondary, I believe.
Big contract with them.
Yeah, I forget exactly what the agreement is between South Placer Fire and the medical. South Placer Fire originally had ambulance services in District 2, which is Granite Bay and whatever. Loomis never had an ambulance service in the original fire department. So I think that's where we do have ambulance service out of our fire department now.
But you also have American Medical Response providing that service as well. So this is in here just so that we have adequate coverage. Do you have a suggestion to change the text?
I'm not sure what adequate coverage is. The fire department reviews that and they decide what that kind of coverage is.
Correct.
Jean, go ahead. Oh, when Russ is done.
I'm
sorry.
wondering if we should actually specify which ambulance service that is, because I would think that that could easily change over the next 20 years, and maybe we should just generalize it to something like "and adequate ambulance service" and not name a specific company.
I think if anything, the fire department would try to take that over because they're the first responders in the area. And we keep adding ambulances and that sort of thing based on public interest.
I tend to agree with Jane on this one. Instead of actually naming the service, just say "and adequate ambulance service." That way it could be any company over the many years this will be in effect.
Yeah, that would do it.
Okay.
Chrissy, yeah, put adequate in front of ambulance.
Well, it's
Oh, that, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
It's already in there. So ambulance,
Yeah.
okay, it's already in there.
okay. Getting back to the sheriff service, law enforcement, any change to the text on those? Okay. I will move on to the next objective. The adequate provision of water and sewer service that keeps pace with demand, provides for fire protection needs, and maintains public health. So the first policy is the existing policy that's in the public services and facilities element right now. I've added to that on item C. So I'll read this. Proposed development shall be connected to public water supply and sewage disposal systems as follows. Any dwelling unit proposed within 300 feet of existing community water supply or sewage disposal service shall be connected to that service prior to occupancy, except where the town manager determines that connection is infeasible because of elevation difference or insufficient line capacity. The 300-foot distance shall be measured from the property line of the subject parcel that is nearest to the existing water supply or sewage disposal service. All development proposed in non-residential land use designations shall be connected to the community water supply and sewage disposal systems prior to occupancy. Residential subdivisions proposing parcels of 2.2 acres or less shall be connected to the community water supply and sewage disposal systems prior to occupancy. Residential subdivisions greater than 2.2 acres not connected to community water or sewer systems shall comply with county environmental health regulations for on-site septic systems and shall ensure well water supplies meet state water quality standards. And then the second policy is that the town shall encourage efficient water use and reduced sewer system demand by requiring water conserving design, landscaping, and fixtures in new construction, encouraging water conservation device retrofits in existing uses, and encouraging water conserving agricultural operations.
Would that have anything in there? The water agency has policies on water conservation. That's where most of our water conservation comes. Should we ask them to comply with those policies because they're changing?
Yeah, we can reference their policies on water conservation.
I mean, that means we don't have to get into all that and we just use their policy.
Except that we have some residents that are not going to be members of those water districts.
True, but we have two different systems that we work with in that particular case. One is irrigation water and one is treated water. So some folks in town use the treated water and some of us folks out in the outlying area have the untreated water that we use, and they still try to conserve that water.
So my question kind of goes to A, the 300 foot of the existing community water supply or sewage disposal. So the water agency requires connection within 600 feet, but here we're requiring 300 feet. Is that a conflict? I mean, obviously it's a conflict.
That's a conflict.
But do we then adjust ours to theirs or leave ours less, 300 feet versus 600 feet? And I say that because we do have a certificate of compliance property that this really hit with. They're 1,000 feet away, but because the size of the parcel, it got kind of sticky with whether or not they had to or could not connect. And it turned out that the bottom line is that it's not feasible for them to connect. They have to put in the easement so that at some point in time, if it can be done, it will be done. But then as that property develops, if they put a house on it, they're going to have septic and water, and well, because they're extended out beyond the limits of that 600, and 1,000 feet. So I don't know. I'm playing devil's advocate here.
I recall those applications coming in, and it was tough to deal with.
Yeah, and I don't think the wording, except where the town manager determines that the connection is infeasible, because we leave it to the agencies to determine the feasibility. So, any town manager, well, not any, but it really leaves the town manager in a sticky wicket as far as approving something, because he's getting pressure from the parcel owner that just wants his parcel and wants septic and well versus connecting to public supply.
My thought is that you take it to 600 feet because that is what the water district is, and I would take it and accept where the district determines the connection is infeasible. Because I recall that project. That was not fun to deal with.
And Carol, is the sewer that way also within 300 feet or 600 feet?
For us or for the sewer? I mean, whose rules?
Yeah, so the water I know is 600 feet, but what's the SP MUD's requirements for distance?
You know, I'm not sure because I thought they've always followed what our rules are. And does our rules for sewer say 300?
Yes.
Okay, let me, you know, while you're discussing this, let me pull up one of our last policies and see what sewer had to say on it.
Okay. Yeah, because I wouldn't want sewer to go to 600 feet if sewer already requires 300 feet by the agency. So those things need to mirror each other, I would think.
They should follow what the agency says, yes.
Yeah.
The other thing we could do is change this policy without putting a specific number in it, refer to the agency requirements.
Yeah.
Because if the agency requirements shift, then the policy shifts.
Yeah. That's a really good recommendation.
So what do we say?
Say it's determined by the district or, you know, the water agency.
Yeah.
Somewhere in there.
We could say any unit within, no. Any unit proposed within proximity to the existing community water supply. Or sewage disposal service.
Andrew,
Yeah.
could you keep it with what it is right now, 600 to 300 feet, with a clause that says unless that agency changes ruling, and we would defer to their ruling or change in the future, to just make it simpler. I don't know.
The thing is, Jeff, you know, when a project applicant comes in, the first thing that Mary Beth does is talk to the water agency and say, hey, can this be connected? What's your requirements? So, you know, given the 20-year life of this general plan, you know, from a planning review status, I think it's much better to refer to the district and their requirements.
Right. Right.
So if you're in the that's what I was trying to write here, is if you're in the proximity of the existing community water supply or sewage disposal services, you're going to be connected pursuant to their requirements or their limitations.
And
Andre, do you have any good legal language we could use here to achieve that?
Yeah.
I like what you've accomplished with the first sentence. I think that really leaves it on whatever the applicable policy is at the time that we're doing the plan check.
Okay.
And now my only question remaining on A is the policy of the water agencies and the sewer disposal system always to measure from the property line? If we have that second sentence in there, or is that something that also fluctuates from agency to agency? I think it's conventional to use property line as your measuring point, but I just don't want to have that then be in conflict with some other.
Christy, yeah, Christy, if you would check that out, and if the district has standard, then we could remove this. If not, we leave it in here. Thank you, Andreas.
Yeah, I would also simplify the second sentence a little bit and just say proximity shall be measured from the property line. Take out the and distance.
Okay.
And we also add that the definition of proximity is determined by the agency so that the applicant knows where to go to find out what that is.
That would be a fair approach to do it that way.
Yeah, that is.
I think that works.
And also a period at the end of the sentence.
Oh, Mary Beth.
I know, I'm sorry.
Going back, proximity shall be measured by district standards.
Yes.
Yes. Jean, go ahead.
Just to gum up the works here a little bit, would this apply to ADUs? Because if you have an ADU out in the country where, or someplace that is not on either of these services, but it becomes available, then they have to shell out the, what, 20, 30,
That-
$40,000 to,
That's
to,
governed by state
sign
law.
up.
It depends on the type of ADU you have, whether or not you have to do a separate sewer connection.
Yeah.
And if they're on septic, they would have to have enough size in their septic system to accommodate the additional bedrooms of the ADU. Or
But we're
they'd have
not-
to put in another leach field system.
but this is not requiring it. If it's
No.
not requiring it. Okay.
Well, it's requiring if you're within the proximity as determined by the district, then it is required. So yes.
Well, the one of the reasons I ask is that PCWA is currently, as of 2 weeks ago, started surveying from Grace down Barton. I don't know how far they're going with the a new water line. So that could affect, as far as they go down the road here, it could affect specifically areas out here. The other question that I had was, it was on the 2.2 acres. And could you clarify? I thought if you had 2.2 acres, you could have a septic system if the county approves it. But the way it's written, it looks like if you have 2.2 acres, you can't have
So
a
Chris,
septic system.
And that is the existing language.
yeah.
And that shows up in the zoning code for the RR district. So parcels over 2.3 acres have the ability to be on septic unless the service is within the district's requirements.
So is it 2.2 or 2.3?
It's actually it's 2.2 acres, but if it's 2.2.00001 acres, just slightly over, that second sentence applies. So since it says greater than 2.2 acres,
Okay.
but it doesn't say how much greater it is.
Okay.
So we don't have a conflict there that,
Thank you.
Is it
And if it's
necessary?
under, it must be connected to the community water?
Correct.
Yeah.
Oh, subdivisions, but not individual homes?
That is correct.
Okay,
For this policy, that's what this policy is saying.
okay. This doesn't address a plot of land, but only a subdivision of
Correct.
greater. Gotcha.
Correct.
Thank you.
By the way, for everybody's information, that line is going from Brace Road down Barton to the other side of the golf course where that Rockland community is. They're probably going to put it in maybe within the next year or so, maybe sooner. Is there any need to put in anything here? I'm not sure about policy with gray water system. I don't know what the county policy might be, but would we have a need to think about that?
I checked the county policy. The current county policy said that all gray water must be connected to the sewer or to the septic. And I know that that's being revised in some communities. So I don't know what our authority is here.
Generally, where you see gray water systems, it's managed by the water district, and then it's used for irrigation and other systems that are publicly owned and managed, and not so much on private properties just because of the health issues. I'm almost thinking a better place to talk about gray water might be in the conservation element, water conservation, and discuss looking for opportunities for the use of gray water, and then that could be a policy that the town could pursue. But because of health department issues, it's usually dealt with, the water company and for public services or public uses. I'm not aware of anywhere where they're using gray water on private property, other than personal use, but public use or subdivision use, I'm not aware of any.
Does Lincoln use that?
What's that?
Does Lincoln use that?
I don't know that answer.
I know they have a gray water system. They have the purple pipe all over the place.
Right.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure how they use it all.
That purple pipe, I think, generally is for public landscaping, parks, those kinds of things. Rather
I think
than,
Crocker Village down here in Sacramento has some purple pipe that they ran through the front yards
yeah.
for landscape irrigation. So there's some very limited developments, I think, where they install it on private property, but generally speaking, you don't have gray water systems
Right.
on private property.
Okay. Any other comments?
I have a quick follow-up on separate sewer connections for ADUs. I just went and looked it up. Generally speaking, where you put an ADU in an existing structure, unless you're adding more than 150 square feet, state law doesn't allow a separate sewer connection to be required. If you're expanding an existing structure or building a new expanding an existing structure by more than 150 feet or building a new structure for an ADU, then a new sewer connection could be required.
Thank you, Andreas. That's good to know.
Okay, moving on. If there's no other comment. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next objective. And that is maintenance of existing drainage systems and new development that provides adequate drainage and does not exceed the capacity of the town's drainage system. So we're talking about stormwater here. The first policy is new development applications will be denied unless it is demonstrated that they will not overload existing drainage facilities. New projects shall provide for the incremental effect of existing storm drainage facilities, as well as provide new facilities needed to adequately service the increased runoff they may generate. A second policy, and there's a highlight on this because I realized I needed to reference the correct document. So the version you see online doesn't have this corrected reference. But it states, the town shall encourage development designs that encourage low impact development measures and minimize drainage concentrations and impervious coverage to maintain natural drainage ways and drainage conditions in conformance with the West Placer Stormwater Quality Design Manual and Town of Loomis Drainage Master Plan programs and policies. Both of those documents are in volume 2, will be in volume 2 of the general plan. So those are existing documents that we can reference, and as they change, we don't need to change the policy. And then the third policy is the town shall acquire easements to creeks and waterways to maintain drainage channels in their natural state and to allow for maintenance of storm drain facilities. Please comment on these. Because we had nothing in relation to storm drainage previously.
Is there a no net loss for drainage
Yep, there is.
for site development? Yeah.
Correct. Yes. I would say silence is concurrence. Move on.
Okay. Moving on to the next. Objective 6, a maintenance of the town's library services. The town shall ensure that the Loomis Library and Community Learning Center facility is provided to current and future residents, and that new development funds its fair share of library operations fees. And then a second, and that's it. That's the only policy on this.
What are the fees? I was just wondering about the library operation fees.
Right.
they're going to share in that, but what are the fees? Is there a set fee they will pay?
So this is something we brought up with Roger the other day, to see if we can put a fee together for a facilities fee for the library, or
Perfect.
cover it under the facilities fee.
Good. Okay.
Is this in anticipation of the 0.25% sales tax? Once it expires, I believe it's 2026, that it does not get reapproved? Is this an effort in anticipation of that?
I believe that's part of it. I haven't talked to Roger. He's looking into it, so he doesn't have quite a lot of detail to provide at this moment, but I believe that's part of putting that together and including that in there.
And basically, we would like to be able to charge new development a library fee to help with the library, and right now we can't.
Right.
So this policy would allow the town to charge a development fee or a fee. I see Jean has her hand up.
Oh, go ahead, Jean.
I was the campaign chairman of the 2016 library fee, the sales tax. I don't think that we're going to be able to get around having to redo that. That was a 10-year one. Library taxes like that typically pass pretty readily. When you do it as a sales tax, people don't like property taxes, but they will accept the sales tax kind of thing on libraries. And I don't think that there's going to be money that the town would have to put into it if we don't renew that 0.25% sales tax. I would say that the facilities fee is probably very appropriate now that the town owns the building, which we didn't own until just a few months ago. We were leasing it. It was on a 10-year lease, probably renewable. But now that we own it, we're in a position to look at changing the building, adding to it some kind of expansion, or even if we did a kind of a community center that was part of the library, something like that, that would expand the kind of services, not just book kind of services, but the other kinds of things that we are able to do as a community learning center. So I think that kind of facilities fee would be particularly appropriate with the opportunity that we have for expansion now.
Good.
Good.
Christy, in this, we need to reference the economic and facilities element, because that's where really this should be implemented, is within the economic and financial element. Yes,
Looking at some of their draft items and also in public safety, there's some crossover. So definitely I'll be getting together with Matthew to see where the land eventually, because there is some duplication going on.
All right, good.
Objective 7, increase diversion of total solid waste generated by the town through source reduction, recycling, composting, and special waste management. The first policy is basically a revision of an existing policy. Loomis shall continue to work with the town solid waste collector, Recology, in improving the recycling program within the town and ensuring adequate waste disposal service is provided. Policy 2, the town should support source reduction, composting, and recycling efforts by encouraging businesses to use recycled products in their operations, encouraging consumers to use recycled products, and through the use of recycled products in all town departments whenever economically and technically feasible. Policy 3, and that last one was a revision to an existing policy. Policy 3 is new development shall be served by waste collection services to ensure maintenance of health standards. Policy 4, which is existing policy 7, if in the future adequate landfill space cannot be found to meet the town's needs, no new development shall be approved until such time as adequate landfill space is identified. Any comment?
I have a comment about recycling. I think you're going to have to include reuse and reduce. The issue with recycling is becoming an international crisis because we can no longer ship most of our garbage anyplace else, and it is not being recycled. Aside from clean number 2 plastic, everything is going into landfill, and Auburn has already used up their landfill site, and it's going to be an increasing problem for everyone. So I think we have to, if we're looking towards the next 10 years, consider supporting all aspects of manufacturer responsibility for the plastics they produce, for starters, reducing people's use, encouraging places like Raley's to cease, putting out all food products in plastic, and to reuse whatever we have, as opposed to only recycle as the solution to what's about to be a garbage crisis.
So
to say nothing of the current crisis of what's in the ocean.
Lorraine, what were the first words you used? I can't recall. Because,
reduce and reuse.
Okay, we have reduction in there, but we don't have reuse. So,
yeah.
Chrissy, up in the objective, we should probably do source reduction, reuse, recycling. So I'd add the word reuse after reduction.
Yeah, I think reduction is going to be our biggest challenge.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and I do think it's important to note that we have new state laws that are coming into effect beginning January 1st.
Right.
We'll have some ordinances being brought to the council as far as our food waste and all these programs that a lot of what you're voicing your concern with, Lorraine, is going to be addressed at a state law, and the town actually is going to be required to be compliant by January 1st on some of these, and then the next couple of years, new phases of this come into it. And so it is actually being addressed pretty aggressively at the state level.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things I didn't realize until recently is that when you have the one big bin system, as opposed to separating recyclables, most of it doesn't get recycled because it becomes contaminated with food waste. And any contaminated product cannot be recycled. So there might be a need to change our agreement with Recology to reflect that, if we're truly going to be recycling.
Well, I think it's going to be interesting to watch, and we'll have a lot of this information out because it really is coming at, and we're working very hand in hand with Recology on this. And the MRF is actually going through a revision, and we'll know in the next 30 days if it is going to stay a one can or if it's going to be expanded to a multi can waste system. None of us locally have control over that. It depends on how the RFP go, the request for proposals goes at the MRF level. So it's coming, and it really is going to be kind of shockingly, I don't want to say restrictive, but it's going to be very regulatory.
Yeah. I'd like to propose doing some education around it for, community members, but the problem is it's going to be an enormous cost for both community members and cities and towns to deal with.
Jean, go ahead.
I don't know if everybody knows about it, but Loomis is in the blue bag program. So if you get the blue bags that they bring like quarterly, you can put your recyclables in there, and it does keep them clean so that they aren't basically wasted. And I appreciate Lorraine's remark about what plastic is recyclable, because I knew that China wasn't taking everything. I called Recology and tried to find out which plastics were still recyclable. And the lady said, oh, if it has that triangle, just throw everything in it, you know, it all is. And I thought, well, that's not true. So I appreciate you letting me know on that one. But we are still in the blue bag program, and you just call them and they leave you a roll of blue bags, and it keeps everything clean.
Christy, we're almost 5 o'clock. Lorraine had the question, how long are we going? How many more policies do we have? Do we push through this or?
No, we have one more left. So we're
Okay.
almost at schools.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
So besides the reuse that we've added to the objective, are there any other text changes you would like to see?
Looking at 7.4, future landfill space,
Yes.
all that goes through the county. I don't believe we have landfill space. I think something needs to be said that this is a county opportunity, and if the county decides that they're going to close the landfill, it's not us that decides that. And
Right.
Recology takes it there. So
This is in relation to having new development come in and add to the waste stream.
but the problem is it goes to the county still. It all still goes to the county. So if the services can't be provided by the county for the waste stream,
And the subdivision can't be built according to this policy.
right.
That would be a county moratorium that passes down to the local jurisdictions.
Right. So it would be a county moratorium. If they put a moratorium on us, then we would not be able to develop.
Correct.
Correct.
Did you want to change any of the wording in there?
I'm not sure how we would change it, but we might just put something there that currently this is could be a county mandated thing or something.
Okay. So any other comments on solid waste? Okay, getting to the last objective. This objective is for schools, so it's the provision of adequate schools. And the first policy is existing policy 3, and that is Loomis shall work with the school districts in reviewing district land use decisions involving the provision of adequate educational facilities for Loomis's students, including the provision of safe routes to school. And it's just that one policy.
No comments?
I think that's great. I think that's a good policy.
I agree.
So Christy, I'm thinking that what we do is the assignment is everybody go home and get this up online, everybody review this, but specifically look at then the implementation measures, which we'll discuss at the next meeting. And Christy, could you go back? I think we need feedback on that policy on fire safe communities.
Oh, that's an implementation measure.
Or implementation measure, yeah.
Yes, so going up under objective PSF 1.2 and policy PSF 1.2.1, we have implementation measure 1.2.1.1. And that states the town shall actively seek certification as a fire-wise community, and new subdivisions of 5 or more lots shall prepare and maintain a fire-safe plan. So the question is, does Loomis want to pursue this in becoming a fire-wise community?
Yes.
Christy, what are the advantages of that? Or are the residents in those communities able to have a reduced insurance policy because they are Firewise?
California Fair Plan and I believe State Farm are two that reduce your policy if you're a Firewise community, and I think others have been added, so you really have to check.
Does the Firewise policy restrict the people of doing certain things on their private property?
The Firewise policy just encourages the 30-foot clearance from your buildings, trim trees up to the 10 feet. You know, those pretty much what are good fire safe policies. And as a Firewise community, then you're going to be asked to dedicate a certain amount of time in maintaining your community, which is tracked, and that can either be through funds or of labor. So it's really that simple. It's not restricting of anything. It's voluntary.
The county has new ordinances about that, do they not?
I don't know if those have been adopted or not. But the nice thing about a Firewise community is you once you're certified as a community, there are insurance companies that give you a reduction in your insurance rates for fire.
So just to clarify, because I'm thinking about the fiscal impact, we have 4 public works employees. They would not be tasked with the clearing of brush or the trimming of trees and the other measures to in the efforts of getting the certification. This would be all volunteer upon the residents. Is that correct?
That's correct. That is correct. So the residents, I'm in a Firewise community, so I record anytime I spend hours working on my yard, and I record anytime I spend a tree guy to take down a dead tree as dollars, and those go into you know, the community's accounting, and then that goes towards your obligation. And I know in our community, I think the obligation is geez, I don't know, like $5,000 equivalent per year. And last year we did $88,000 in equivalents with labor and actual. So it really is a very low margin to reach, but the town doesn't have to do anything. However, if the town, say, uses some of their funding, I know there's some tree funds that could be used for probably cleaning up some existing oak woodlands. If that's used, then that money could go towards it. So the town's money could be counted against it, but it's really up to the local residents.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, because that is something that we are currently looking at, just for your information.
Oh, good.
Good. Is there a way to see what it entails to get a certification? Because how can we say, yes, we're in favor of it when we don't even know exactly what it is?
What you do is go to Firewise USA on the internet, and it tells you.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah. I have to tell you, we've been a community 1 year, and the improvements in our community have been outstanding. It's amazing what people have done.
So with that, I will leave that in. And then we can come back at the next meeting and look at those implementation measures. And then if you have any further comments on the goals, objectives, or policies, please submit them. And we will, you know, either address them as they come in, or if it's something that requires some committee conversation, then we can discuss it at the next meeting.
Christy, can we share what you've done today? You know, save it and I can send it out to the committee members so that they're looking at the changes we've made today.
Yeah, let me clean up some of this stuff in the margin, and then I'll send it to you.
Okay.
if we could share that tomorrow, and then just so the committee knows, our person who puts things up online is on vacation, so this will not go up online until next week.
Yeah.
So that's why, yeah, it needs to be emailed out.
Yeah. That way the committee gets the current issue.
Yeah. One other thing that we just discovered for this document and the environmental document, all of these documents are going to have to be formatted according to ADA and state requirements. We're not sure exactly how that will affect the look of the document, but it will affect the look. So just be aware that we are going to, as we get this ready to publish, it will be reformatted to meet those requirements.
Right. The formatting and flow may change a bit. You have to follow a specific hierarchy for headers and text wise. So some of that may change. And then this element doesn't have that, but some of the others might have maps and tables, and they will need to have an explanation associated with them to be ADA compliant. So you'll see the formatting change slightly probably in the next versions that you start to see. Don't be alarmed, it's all the same content, just a little bit of a different layout.
Would that include a 14-point font for my
Really big.
joking?
I think 11 is the smallest you can go under ADA. So this requirement is more to do with headers, footers, and explanation of tables than anything else. But things like, I know when we write documents, sometimes we'll shorten up spacing between lines so everything stays on one page. Under the ADA compliance, if there's 3 words that go to the second page, 3 words go to the second page because of that formatting. So it's stuff like that.
Can't make it as pretty anymore.
Yeah.
But it's all the same information. And so just before we cut off here, you'll see a strikeout at the end, and these are just some of the finance section, which is down here. And then this is the policy that I split up, and then these were combined. So, and moved. I suggest this one is moved to the energy section of the conservation element. So that's just what's going on at the end when you're reading through it.
So one of the other things to think of at the next meeting, if we get through all the goals, policies, objectives, and implementation measures, that's probably the end of this committee's responsibility. So we'll be asking the committee to make a recommendation to the Planning Commission when the Planning Commission looks at the draft general plan. With the caveat, if there's something that comes up that needs to be discussed, the committee will be reconvened to discuss it. But this pretty much will complete your, once you get through this document, it completes your obligation for this committee.
And a public announcement from yours truly. We are scheduling at this point some public workshop, public input sessions, you know, kind of like we did with our kickoff when we started the general plan, where we're going to do 2 meetings. One will be June 15th in the evening from 6 to 8 p.m. at the Blue Goose. And then Saturday, June 19th from 11 to 1 p.m. at the depot. Because now that the world's opening back up, the Blue Goose Saturday events are totally booking. So we can do an event at the depot. We figure we can get 20 people inside, and as more people show up, they can just kind of rotate in and out. We haven't worked out the logistics of the depot event yet, but the Blue Goose should be sufficient to house everybody and just kind of go through element by element where we're at with all of these things to further bolster public input on these matters. So stay tuned for those notices.
And Mary Beth, those will be on YouTube, but not Zoom. Is that correct?
That's correct. They will be live streamed through YouTube, but it won't be a Zoom meeting. And, you know, we're trying to encourage that public participation as much as we can. And the outcome of that, if anybody has additional comments, you know, we're trying to wrap up our comments and looking towards the end date for public comment on most of these elements, at least the ones that are completed. We know circulation is going to go a little longer and land use will probably go a little longer. But public comment to end on public services and facilities for June 30th, and whatever other elements were wrapped up with by then. So.
All right, so at this point, Christy, thank you for your presentation. You did a lot of heavy lifting and it's much appreciated. Also, like to thank Anders and Andreas for your timely input and clarification of many issues here. So as I understand it, our next meeting will be covering the majority of that meeting will be covering the implementation, and that's where the rubber meets the road with this. And with that, I think our next meeting, well, I don't think I actually know, it is scheduled June 16th at 3 p.m. So I'd like to thank the committee members and the public for their participation and comment. And with that, I'd like to bring this meeting to adjournment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.